All right, well, welcome back. So the next one on the external evidence is another statement from a man called Clement of Alexandria. We all know where Alexandria is located, so in Egypt. So this statement was actually recorded, was traced back to around 195 AD. So, and this is stated in his statement that what he said is that when Peter had proclaimed the word of God publicly at Rome and declared the gospel under the influence of the Spirit, those present besought Mark as one who had followed him, which is Peter, a long time and remembered the things said to record his word. So if you look at this as well, what Clement is trying to say here is that, you can say that he also, he's trying to also support, he was also supporting the other statement too, that, Mark followed Peter around as being a preacher and all that. So at the end of the day, so those who are present there, the question is, who are those people we are referring to? Probably the Christians of then, or some people who needed the copy of Peter's preaching, So they besought Mark to actually, record the words of Peter. So record the words of Peter. So again, it says that when Peter proclaimed the word of God publicly at Rome and declared the gospel under the influence of the Spirit, So we can still say probably Peter was still alive when Mark was writing this. When Mark probably was still alive. So another thing we can still bring out there is that Peter was in Rome. Mark too was in Rome as the disciple and the interpreter. So basically, this statement is telling us that, Mark wrote that gospel in Rome, probably when Peter too was still alive. But Peter besought those people who are present actually besought Mark to actually, have a record of Peter's preaching. So now, Clement gave two statements. So that's the first statement. The second statement, it says that, so when Peter learned by a revelation from the Spirit what Mark had done, so that is the writing of the gospel, so he was pleased with the zeal of the man and ratified the writing for use in the churches. So that is Peter was clearly alive at this time. So the Spirit, he got to know what Mark had done in the Spirit, by the Spirit. So, and he was very pleased and very impressed by what Mark had done. So from this now we can still say that Peter was alive by the time Mark was writing this gospel. So Peter was actually pleased. You should understand, he was very pleased and happy with what Mark did. So as a result of that, he ratified the writing. That is this writing. He actually endorsed, the writing or this gospel for the use of the church in the churches. So those are the two statements of Clement. So we still have another testimony from Tertullian, who was also, one of the early church fathers, and also one of the early Christian writers and apologists too. So in his book, that was written around circa about 200 AD, so which is titled Against Marcion. So from this book too, it also states that the gospel which Mark published may be affirmed to be Peter's, whose interpreter Mark was. So look at this. That is, the gospel that was written by Mark it belonged to Peter. In what sense? That is, he was writing what Peter was saying. Peter was not an educated person. He was a fisherman. So, and did not receive that formal education according to the educational system of things. So now, from this we can derive what Tertullian is trying to say here, that Mark actually, wrote what he heard Peter preached, what he heard Peter preach. So, and don't forget that each of them has been supporting the fact. They have been repeating the same thing, that Mark was Peter's interpreter. Mark was Peter's interpreter, and he wrote what Mark had, what Peter had preached. So that is that about Tertullian. So we also have another one called Origen. Origen, that was around 230 AD. Origen too was also one of the early church fathers. 230 AD. So what did he say? He said that Mark wrote the second gospel as Peter guided him. If you look at that, it was Mark was writing under the instruction. He was writing under the instruction of Peter. So Peter was the one guiding Mark by the time he was writing this gospel. So another one that I did not have is that of Jerome in his own commentary too on Matthew. In his commentary of Matthew. So if you look at that, that was written around 380. So he also stated that Mark was written by an apostolic men. Luke was written by apostolic men, while Matthew was written by an apostle. So looking at that too, is still supporting the fact that Mark was the author of this gospel. Now let's see the significance of this statement. What is the significance of this statement? Number one, of this what's the testimony? Number one, what can we bring out of this testimony? Number one is that Mark was the interpreter of Peter. Don't forget to take note of that. It was the interpreter of Peter who wrote what he heard Peter preached. So all of them has been supporting that. Number two is that he wrote accurately, but not in chronological order. So the arrangements might not be in chronological order, but his writing are reliable. They're accurate. He gave us raw information without even diluting or even removing anything. We are still going to see by the time we get to Mark and priority. So what are the things that prioritize Mark gospel as being the first written gospel? We are still going to talk about that too. So he wrote accurately, not necessarily in chronological order. If you get back to Papias annotation. So another one is that it was not a disciple of Jesus Christ in blood and in flesh and blood. It was not an eyewitness. It was not an eyewitness, but just a disciple of disciples, a disciple of Jesus. So that is the follower of a companion of Peter. So we can also state that it was also a companion of Peter, just stated now. Another thing is that his account, like I said before, is the most reliable account. Take it or leave it. The most reliable account. So if you look at he just gave us, he gave us exactly what, as he had received from Peter. Unlike Matthew and Mark that look for other sources, they combine them together to that of Mark, and they refine it. They remove some derogations, they remove some statements, redundancies, and all that. They remove them and they rephrase it. But Mark wrote according to what he had received from Peter. So now, likewise, from these statements, testimonies, Mark did not focus on the discourses of Jesus Christ. He did not focus on the discourses, that is the preaching or the parables, but he majorly focused on the miracles performed by Jesus Christ. That is why we call him the gospel. We call the gospel gospel of action. The gospel of action. And the last one is that from this testimony we get to know the setting or where he was when he was writing this gospel, which was the region of Italy and Rome. So we get to see that in Antimachian prologue, and also if we study well the Clement of Alexandria, the statement of Clement of Alexandria of around 195 AD too, we get to know that Mark wrote that in Rome. So that is that about the external evidence. So in the next video, I will take us through, I will also explain the internal evidences. So what are the things, what are the testimony, what are the things we can see in the book that are pointing to Mark as being the author of the book. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to subscribe, share, like, and comment, and send your question on the comment section. Thank you.